Did you know there are churches covered floor-to-ceiling in exterior frescoes that have survived 500 years of rain and snow? Paintings on the outside of buildings. Or that there's a cemetery where every grave is a brightly painted wooden cross with humorous poems about how the person died? Or a medieval citadel where people still live in 14th century houses, send their kids to school up a covered wooden staircase, and run bakeries and guild halls? These places exist. They're in Romania. And while you're fighting crowds in Prague and Paris, Romania remains one of Europe's best-kept secrets. But here's what nobody tells you. This isn't just about castles and legends. Romania is where medieval Europe is still alive, where the Danube creates one of Europe's wildest deltas, and where you can taste wines from vineyards older than most European nations. By the end of this video, we'll reveal the one location that captures everything remarkable about this country: medieval history, natural beauty, and living culture all in one place. And it might not be what you expect. We're just getting started. Subscribe to our channel, The Destination Dupe, to rediscover the world through a fresh lens with stories, perspectives, and culture, one journey at a time. Are you ready? Let's begin. Let's start in Brasov, because this is where most people's Romanian journey begins, and it's already better than what you'll find in overcrowded Prague or Salzburg. Picture this: a perfectly preserved medieval square surrounded by colorful Baroque buildings, mountain peaks rising dramatically behind the city, and cafe culture that rivals Vienna. But here's the difference: you'll actually get a table. Why does Brasov work when other medieval cities feel like theme parks? The answer is in the layers. This isn't just a pretty square preserved for tourists. Walk 3 blocks in any direction and you'll find locals going about their daily lives, bakeries that have been family-run for generations, and a black church that's genuinely Gothic. The black church earned its name from a fire in 1689, and inside you'll find something unexpected. One of the world's largest collections of Turkish carpets hanging on Christian walls. Why? Because Brasov was a major trading hub between East and West. And these carpets tell the story of commerce, conflict, and cultural exchange that textbooks miss. But here's what makes Transylvania different from Tuscany or Provence: the tourism infrastructure hasn't transformed the villages yet. When we talk about Saxon villages, we're not talking about carefully restored vacation rentals or wine estates catering to visitors. We're talking about communities that have maintained their character for 800 years because they never stopped being real, working villages. Take Sighișoara. This isn't just Europe's best preserved medieval citadel. It's a living city where people still inhabit 14th century houses. The clock tower isn't a museum piece. It's been marking time for 700 years. And those cobblestone streets? They've worn smooth from centuries of actual use, not from tour buses. What's the real story behind Vlad the Impaler's birthplace here? Everyone focuses on the vampire myth, but Vlad was defending his territory against an empire that had conquered most of Eastern Europe. His methods were brutal, yes, but they worked. The Ottoman Empire learned to avoid Wallachia. That's not a horror story. That's medieval geopolitics. Now let's talk about something you won't find in France or Spain: fortified churches that served as community refuges during invasions. The Biertan church isn't just architecturally impressive, it's a complete defensive system. Triple walls, watchtowers, storage rooms for food, and here's the detail that makes you rethink everything: a marriage prison. When couples wanted to divorce, the community locked them in a room together with one set of utensils, one bed, and one Bible. They had to work together to survive. Out of hundreds of couples imprisoned this way over centuries, only one divorced. Does that seem harsh? Consider that this community survived waves of invasions specifically because they valued unity and cooperation. Viscri takes this concept further. This UNESCO World Heritage Village of just 400 people has 7 fortified churches in the surrounding area. Why so many? Because when you're positioned between 3 empires, Ottoman, Habsburg, and Russian, you don't just build one stronghold, you build a network. And here's what makes these villages relevant today. King Charles III bought and restored a house in Viscri, not as a publicity stunt, but because he recognized something that sustainable tourism experts are just starting to understand. These communities have been practicing organic farming, traditional crafts, and low-impact living for 800 years. They're not recreating a sustainable past. They never left it. Everyone wants to see Dracula's castle, so let's address it. Bran Castle is stunning, a 14th century fortress perched on a cliff at the entrance to a mountain pass. But was Vlad the Impaler ever really here? Historical records suggest he might have been imprisoned here briefly, but this was never his residence. So why visit? Because what Bran Castle actually represents is more interesting than the vampire myth. This was a critical defensive position controlling the trade route between Transylvania and Wallachia. Every archway, every narrow staircase, every hidden courtyard was designed for defense. Walk through it, understanding that, and it becomes a masterclass in medieval military architecture. But if you want Vlad's actual castle, you need to climb 1,480 steps to Poenari Fortress. And we mean climb. This isn't a gentle tourist walk. The ruins cling to a cliff above the Argus River, and when you reach the top, you understand everything about Vlad's strategy. This fortress couldn't be sieged. The only way to take it was to wait for the occupants to run out of supplies. According to legend, Vlad's wife jumped from these walls when the Ottomans approached, choosing death over capture. Real or not, the story tells you what life was like on this frontier. Every defensive choice was about survival against overwhelming odds. How does this compare to Neuschwanstein in Germany or the Loire castles in France? Those are stunning examples of royal architecture, palaces designed to display wealth and power. Poenari was different. This was pure military strategy. Every stone placement was about survival. Top Gear called the Transfagarasan Highway the best road in the world, and for once, they weren't exaggerating. This isn't just scenic. It's a 56-mile engineering achievement built as a middle finger to the Soviet Union. In 1968, Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia. Romania's dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, despite being communist himself, opposed the invasion. His response? Build a military road across the impassable Carpathian mountains so Romanian forces could rapidly redeploy if the Soviets came for Romania next. The construction took 4 years and cost 40 lives. Workers blasted through mountains, carved tunnels through solid rock, and created over 800 curves. At the highest point, you'll find Balia Lake, a glacial lake surrounded by peaks that wouldn't look out of place in the Swiss Alps. The views rival anything Switzerland offers, but here you'll find far fewer tourists fighting for the same photo. What makes driving this road different from Norway's coastal routes or Italy's Stelvio Pass? The Transfagarasan is only open 5 months a year. From October to June, snow makes it impassable. This isn't a highway maintained for tourists. It's a mountain road that happens to be spectacular, and that raw, seasonal nature is exactly what makes it authentic. But here's the question nobody asks. If you're not a driver, does this road still matter? Absolutely. Because at the summit, you can take a cable car to one of Romania's mountain refuges and hike trails that see a fraction of the crowds you'd find in the Alps. The Carpathians are Europe's last wild mountains, and the Transfagarasan gives you access to that wilderness. In the northeastern region of Bucovina, you'll find something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Churches covered entirely in exterior frescoes that have survived 500 years of weather. Why would anyone paint elaborate biblical scenes on the outside of a building? Because in the 15th and 16th centuries, most people couldn't read. These painted monasteries were billboards, textbooks, and newspapers rolled into one. Voronet Monastery's deep blue background has become so iconic that art historians call it Voronet blue, a shade so distinctive they still can't fully replicate the original pigment recipe. At Humor Monastery, the exterior shows the siege of Constantinople in 626 AD. But look closer at the defenders and attackers. The artist painted the Byzantines as Christian heroes and the invaders as Turks, which is historically inaccurate since the Turks didn't exist as a power in 626. Why the change? Because these frescoes were painted during the Ottoman invasions and the message was clear. God protects the faithful against Muslim invaders. This isn't just art, it's propaganda that survived half a millennium. What makes it valuable today isn't the religious message, it's the window into how communities processed existential threats through visual storytelling. Sucevita Monastery takes a different approach. Its ladder to paradise fresco shows souls climbing toward heaven while demons pull them down. Some make it, most don't. It's medieval psychology made visible, the constant struggle between virtue and temptation, painted in vivid greens and reds that have somehow survived centuries of rain, snow, and sun. Can you find anything comparable in Western Europe? The Sistine Chapel's ceiling is protected indoors. These monasteries put their masterpieces outside and they endured. That says something about both the pigments they developed and the dry mountain climate of Bucovina. Everyone claims their destination is where time stopped. In Maramures, it's literally true. This northern region maintained medieval agricultural practices, wooden architecture, and traditional crafts not as a tourist attraction, but because geography isolated them from modernization until recently. The wooden churches here aren't reconstructions. They're original 17th and 18th century structures built entirely without nails. Master craftsmen shaped oak beams to interlock perfectly, creating tall, narrow churches with spires that reach toward heaven. Why build this way? Nails were expensive and wood was abundant. But the real genius is in the engineering. These churches flex in strong winds instead of breaking. And then there's the Mary Cemetery in Sapanta. Each grave marker is a brightly painted cross with a poem, an illustration about the deceased's life. One shows a man being run over by a truck. Another depicts a woman gossiping. These aren't respectful eulogies, they're honest, sometimes brutal, occasionally hilarious remembrances carved in wood and painted in primary colors. Why does this matter? Because this is what happens when a culture develops its own relationship with death, isolated from broader European customs. Western graveyards emphasize solemnity and grief. The Mary Cemetery emphasizes life, personality, and communal memory. Which approach is more healthy? That's not for us to say, but it's definitely more interesting. Visit in summer and you'll still see families making hay using horse-drawn carts and manual labor. This isn't a demonstration for visitors. It's how they actually harvest their fields. The lifestyle looks quaint until you understand the practicality. Traditional methods work for small family farms. Hay doesn't spoil if harvested this way, and horses integrate into the farm ecosystem naturally. How does this compare to Tuscany or Provence? Those regions have embraced tourism alongside their agriculture. Maramures hasn't reached that level of tourism development yet. Whether that's a positive depends on what you value. Easier access and infrastructure versus raw, less polished experiences. Bucharest used to be called the Paris of the East. Then communism happened, and dictator Nicolae Ceausescu demolished a quarter of the city to build his megalomaniacal palace of parliament. The result is a capital that doesn't know what it wants to be. Elegant French-style boulevards next to brutal communist blocks next to glass modern towers. Is this chaos beautiful? No. But is it fascinating? Absolutely. Because Bucharest is what happens when multiple failed systems collide in one city and somehow continue functioning. The Palace of Parliament deserves its own discussion. This is the world's heaviest building. 1 million cubic meters of marble, 3,500 tons of crystal, 480 chandeliers, and over 1,000 rooms. Ceausescu demolished churches, monasteries, and entire neighborhoods to build it. Families were given 24 hours to evacuate before bulldozers arrived. Should you visit? Yes, because understanding authoritarian architecture is important. This building wasn't designed for efficiency or beauty. It was designed to intimidate. Every excessive chandelier, every meter of marble, every room that serves no purpose exists to say, I have unlimited power and resources. But Bucharest's old town shows you the other side. Narrow streets packed with cafes, live music spilling from underground clubs, street performers, and an unrestricted nightlife energy where the party runs until dawn. You stumble back to your hotel past buildings that look like they survived a war. Because some of them did. Romania's recent history is visible in its architecture, and Bucharest doesn't pretend otherwise. It's raw, it's loud, and it's unapologetically itself. Loving the journey so far? Subscribe to our channel to explore the world with us every week. Now, let's continue. Sibiu was European Capital of Culture in 2007, and then everyone forgot about it. Which is perfect because now you can experience a perfectly preserved medieval city without fighting crowds. The buildings here have eyes, dormer windows that look like they're watching you. It's architectural detail that modern builders would never bother with, but it gives the city personality. The Astra Museum of Traditional Folk Civilization is where Romanian rural culture got archived. Over 300 historical buildings, houses, churches, mills, workshops were moved here piece by piece from villages across Romania. Walk through and you're not seeing replicas. You're seeing the actual 18th century blacksmith shop, the actual 19th century windmill, the actual village church where communities gathered for 200 years. Alba Iulia is where Romanian history crystallized. This star-shaped fortress is where the three Romanian principalities, Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania, united in 1918 to form modern Romania. The fortress itself is Vauban style, built by the Habsburgs, making it one of the best preserved star fortresses in Europe. Walk the walls at sunset, and you'll understand military architecture. Every angle of the star gives defenders clear firing lines. Every gate has multiple defensive layers. This isn't decorative, it's mathematics applied to warfare. And unlike most European fortresses, you can walk everywhere. No ropes, no restrictions, just you and 18th century military engineering. The Danube River ends its 1,770-mile journey in Romania, creating Europe's largest and best-preserved delta. Over 300 bird species, 160 fish species, and 1,200 plant varieties live in an ecosystem that spans 2,200 square miles of channels, lakes, and reed beds. Why does this matter when Europe has plenty of nature reserves? Because the Danube Delta isn't a park with designated trails. It's a working ecosystem where traditional fishing villages still operate, where pelicans outnumber tourists, and where you can navigate channels for hours without seeing another boat. The Dalmatian pelican colonies here are among the largest in the world. These aren't small birds. They have 9-foot wingspans. Watch them hunt, and you'll see coordination that would impress a military unit. They form lines, beat the water with their wings to drive fish into shallows, then feast together. But here's what makes the delta accessible. Floating hotels and local fishermen who've converted their boats for tourism. Stay in the village of Chryson or Sulina, and you're not in a resort. You're in a community where fishing is still the primary economy and tourism is supplementary income. How does this compare to other European deltas or wetlands? The Camargue in France is beautiful but heavily managed. The Danube Delta is managed minimally. UNESCO designation protects it, but the ecosystem largely governs itself. That wildness is increasingly rare in Europe. Romania has 140 miles of Black Sea coastline that almost nobody knows about. Constanta, the main port city, was founded by ancient Greeks as Thomas. The poet Ovid was exiled here by Emperor Augustus, and he wrote some of his most bitter poetry about how much he hated this remote outpost. Today, Constanta is where Romanian beach culture happens. The casino building stands as an abandoned Art Nouveau masterpiece, once a glamorous venue for Europe's elite, now a skeletal reminder of pre-communist opulence. Should they restore it? Probably. But in its current state, it's a striking symbol of how quickly grandeur can decay. Head south to Vama Veche, and you'll find Romania's answer to Ibiza, except without the pretension. This is where Romanian youth culture goes to party on beaches, sleep in local pensions, and live on grilled fish and local beer. It's not luxurious. It's not supposed to be. What makes the Black Sea different from the Mediterranean? The water is less salty, the beaches are wider, and the temperatures are cooler. If you're expecting Croatia's crystal-clear Adriatic or Greece's white sand beaches, you'll be disappointed. But if you want authentic seaside culture without mass tourism, this delivers. The Carpathian Mountains are home to Europe's largest populations of brown bears, wolves, and lynx. We're not talking about protected populations in fenced reserves. These are wild animals in a mountain range that spans most of Romania. Over 6,000 brown bears live in these forests, and bear encounters are common enough that hikers actually need to take precautions. Does this make the Carpathians dangerous? Only if you're careless. Does it make them different from the Alps? Absolutely. The Alps have bears, wolves, and lynx too, but in much smaller numbers and more managed populations. The Carpathians support 6,000 plus brown bears, among Europe's largest concentrations of large predators. The difference isn't authenticity, it's density. Here, wilderness isn't something carefully reintroduced and monitored. It never fully left. The trail system here connects mountain refuges where you can spend nights at altitude, hiking hut to hut, across ranges that see a fraction of the traffic on Mont Blanc or the Matterhorn. The facilities are basic. We're talking bunk beds, communal meals, and shared bathrooms. But the solitude is real. What's the trade-off between comfort and experience? In the Swiss Alps, you'll have heated rooms, gourmet meals, and Wi-Fi. In the Carpathians, you'll have authentic mountain culture, genuine wilderness, and the kind of remoteness that's becoming impossible to find in Western Europe. Romanian cuisine doesn't get the respect it deserves, mainly because it's comfort food rather than haute cuisine. But understanding Romanian food means understanding the country's geographic position between empires. Sarmal, cabbage rolls stuffed with meat and rice, came from the Ottomans. Mamaliga, polenta made from cornmeal, sustained peasants for centuries and is now served at every traditional restaurant. Mitsi, grilled meat rolls, are street food that Romanians will debate endlessly about who makes them best. Then there's ciorba, sour soup that comes in dozens of regional varieties. Ciorba de burtă is tripe soup that tastes nothing like you'd expect. Ciorba de perisoare is meatball soup with vegetables and sour cream. The souring comes from fermented bran or vinegar, giving these soups a distinctive tang that you either love or hate. And Romanian wine, it's criminally underrated. The Dealu Mare region produces reds that compete with French wines in quality and character. The Fetiasca Niagara grape is indigenous to Romania and creates wines that sommeliers are just starting to discover. Why isn't Romanian wine famous? Marketing. Romanian wineries focused on domestic consumption rather than exports. But walk into any wine bar in Bucharest and you'll taste wines that deserve international recognition. Let's address the concerns you're probably having. First, safety. Romania's crime rates are lower than most Western European countries. The biggest risks are pickpockets in Bucharest and overcharging by taxi drivers. Both are easily avoided with basic precautions. Transportation. Romania's train network connects major cities efficiently, and buses fill in the gaps. Renting a car gives you freedom but means dealing with rural roads that range from excellent to challenging. GPS works perfectly, and most highway signs include English. Language barrier? English is widely spoken in cities and tourist areas. Romanian is a Romance language, so if you speak Spanish, Italian, or French, you'll recognize many words. Learning basic phrases helps, but you won't be stranded. Best time to visit? May through September for mountain activities and full accessibility. June through September for the Black Sea coast. October for fall colors and fewer tourists. Winter if you're into skiing. Romanian ski resorts offer authentic mountain experiences without the crowds you'll find in the Alps. Remember that mystery location we mentioned? The place that captures everything remarkable about Romania? It's Sighișoara. And here's why this medieval citadel succeeds where other preserved cities fail. Sighișoara combines authentic medieval architecture with living community, historical significance with daily life, and cultural depth with accessibility. You're not visiting a museum. You're staying in a 14th century house that people have inhabited continuously for 700 years. The clock tower still marks time. The covered staircase, 175 wooden steps built in 1642, still leads students to the school on the hill. The 9 towers that once defended the city still stand, each one originally maintained by a different craft guild: tailors, shoemakers, blacksmiths, butchers. This is where Vlad the Impaler was born, yes, but more importantly, this is where Saxon merchants created a completely self-sufficient medieval fortress city that functions today exactly as it did 600 years ago. The difference is that now you can sleep in those medieval houses, eat in those guild halls, and walk those defensive walls. Stand on the walls at sunset and you'll see why Sighișoara matters. In one direction, you'll see the modern town that grew outside the medieval walls. In another, you'll see the Transylvanian countryside that has barely changed in centuries. And right where you're standing, you're in a place that bridges past and present without choosing between them. That's what makes Sighișoara the perfect symbol for Romania. It doesn't preserve the past by freezing it. It honors the past by continuing to live in it. So here's what we've covered. Castles that actually defended kingdoms, not just looked pretty. Mountain roads built to stop Soviet tanks. Painted monasteries that served as medieval billboards. Villages that maintained traditional culture not for tourists, but because that's how life works there. Romania isn't pretending to be something it's not. It's not marketing itself as the next Prague or trying to recreate Tuscan wine culture. It's offering what actually exists: authentic Eastern European culture that hasn't been sanitized for Western tourists. Does that make it perfect? No. The infrastructure isn't as polished as Germany's. The service isn't as refined as France's. The accommodations aren't as luxurious as Switzerland's. But none of that matters if you're traveling to experience culture rather than consume luxury. The window on Romania won't stay open forever. Tourism is increasing, and what feels undiscovered today will be well known in 5 years. So, if you've been thinking about experiencing Europe before, mass tourism homogenizes it completely, Romania is your opportunity. This was the Destination Dupe. Subscribe to our channel. The destination Dupe to rediscover the world through a fresh lens with stories, perspectives, and culture. One journey at a time. Until next time, keep exploring the roads less traveled.